Hey all. Well, my son Jamie has stereotypies, and it's a motor disorder. And so way back when he was little, like the minute I picked him up at the hospital, I had him, and I picked him up, and I knew something wasn't right. He was almost like a little wet noodle, and there was like no muscle tone. And I thought, like my other kids never felt like that. So, um, anyways, I thought something's different, but whatever. So then, and he was a big baby, so that's, another thing. But he just, I don't know, it was different. And then even at the hospital, he'd have these little flutters, and was not like anything I had seen in my other three kids. And so I talked to the doctor and said, hey, he's had these flutters, like they're like, like these quick little flutters. And they told me it was an immature nervous system. And I'm thinking, the child was, I think, a week overdue. Like, how could it be immature? Okay, whatever. So I think they just were trying to appease me, get me out of there, I'm sure, because it was during the swine flu time when no one could come visit you, which was kind of nice, but whatever. So it just kept progressing. It started as these little flutters, and then it would be these, they would last for seconds, like 10 seconds. And I would try to capture it on video because I wanted to be able to show the doctor, like, this is not, it's something doesn't seem right. And he would get them when he'd look at the ceiling fan, like he's getting his diaper changed, or the ceiling fan, when he was tired. When he was excited, he'd get these little flutters. So anyways, I was able to start taping them because it would last a little longer. And they changed though, since like when he was born versus as he got older. And so I thought they were seizures because the way they are, like he loses all control, and he's in this, I call them his movements. And so I kept taking him to one neurologist in Perrysburg, and I was like, he's like, he's really cute. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, he's my kid. Yeah, I know he's really cute. Shh. But I brought him here because I think there's a problem. So then they did an EEG on him, and they're like, no, everything looks good, a 15-minute one. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And the mom in me kept thinking there's something not right, or there's something going on with this kid, and constantly barking. Anyways, so I took him to another neurologist in Toledo. That was a mess. I waited there for, 2 hours to see him. And my son was starving because he was like almost 1.5. And I think once we got back there, he had gone to the restroom, my little guy. And so I'm like, I got to go change him. And the doctor acted like he was upset because I said, whoa, I've waited here now for 2 hours and waiting for you. And so don't get upset if I'm changing my kid. I was a little ticked. Plus, when I went into his office to talk with him, because I don't remember why, like we didn't go into a waiting room. I don't know if they had one ready or something. He's got papers everywhere. I mean, it was so chaotic in there. And I thought, yeah, I don't think I'm going to have this neurologist deal with my child, because you don't seem like you can deal with life, let alone my kid. Well, anyways, so he had scheduled an overnight or a 24-hour EEG. And so we did that. And I brought him back in, and he was discussing it. And he's like, well, we can medicate him. It was called, and I don't know what it's exactly called, clonatide. I don't know. It's where your child is like a zombie. And I'm like, yeah, I really want him like that, during his 2-year-old stage. I'm like, no, I'm not. I did get the medicine, but I never gave it to him. And so then he would have these flutters and move his head and open his mouth, and they would just be nonstop. He couldn't stop them until I would go to him and say, I would either call his name Jamie, or I would put my hand on him, or whatever. But I was like, I got to do some experiments with this because no one could tell me what it is. Everyone was dismissing it. And I'm like, it's something. I mean, maybe it's not life-threatening, but it's something. So we were at Menards, and he was in his little movement. I call them episodes too. He was in his episode, and I thought, I wonder if he can hear me in the episode. So I'm like, I like M&Ms. M&Ms are so good. I want M&Ms. And he comes out, of the movement, and he's like, M&Ms, M&Ms. And I thought, he can hear me. So he can hear me while this is going on. So that was good. I'm learning just stuff on my own. I didn't know what they were called. I didn't know what it was. I still didn't know. So I finally decided to take him to, I showed my OBGYN who delivered him. I'm like, look, I had so much footage at that point that I was even showing the other doctors, the neurologists. And she's like, Roberta, you've got to get him into Perrysburg Peds. I said, I tried. They won't take 4 kids. They're all overbooked. She said, let me call. So she called Perrysburg Peds and she got us in, which was so nice. And I went in, talked to the Perrysburg P people, showed them my videos. And she's like, I really think it's a motor disorder. And that's the first I had heard of that. But I want you to go to Cleveland Clinic and see, because obviously you're not getting any help around here. I said, no, I'm not. So I took him to Cleveland Clinic. Like, she made the appointment and everything. And it was maybe within a month. It was July, actually. July of 2000, I want to say 14. And so at that point, he was, maybe it was 13. I don't remember. But he was 3, 2.5, 3, I don't know. But anyways, so I took him in, and my sister went with me because I don't drive, especially places I don't know. So we went in, and Dr. Ghosh, we went in to see him, and we were talking to him, and right away he said he's got stereotypies, and I'm like, what's that? And he's like, it's a motor disorder. And he said, we're finding this in children, that children that have autism, this is their secondary, like primary would be their autism, and then secondary would be their motor stereotypies, or CMS, complex motor stereotypies. Your child does not have autism, which I do feel like he's on the spectrum somewhere, as I do feel like we all are on the spectrum somewhere, but whatever. He said, your child does not have autism, and also it's found in children with mental retardation, but 5% of children that don't have either have stereotypies as their primary disorder. So he said he's in the 5%. I'm like, oh. And he said, I just did this huge study on it, and John Hopkins is on board with it, and there are some things that we can do to ease his movements or have him learn different things to, shape his movements, but he's always going to have them. They're not going to hurt him. Is he going to get bullied? At that point, I didn't know. I'm bawling my eyes out because I'm like, I thought there was going to be a cure and he wouldn't have these anymore and whatever. Anyways, so we learned to embrace them, and he's now become aware. He knows he has it. He was worried about today with the MRI, going in and getting that done, because you have to lay still. And I didn't even tell him till 5 minutes before we were getting the MRI. He didn't really know why he was getting all his appliance stuff out of his mouth, but he couldn't get an MRI with all that stuff in there. So I told him like 5 minutes. I said, hey, we're going to the hospital and they're going to take a picture of your brain because you have an arachnocyst on the back. When we got one of the scans, when he was we got the scan for the stereotypies, they found an arachnocyst when he was little. And the doctor had said, hey, we haven't checked on that for 10 years. Is it growing? I'm like, what? What do you mean? I thought it was good. And so she's like, let's just check. And so then that's what brought us here today. So we go into the hospital. Like, he was like, oh, they're doing a picture of my brain. And I said, yes. And I said, I can't remember if it's with contrast or without, but if it's with, you also are going to have an IV. No big deal. It's going to be a poke. They're going to put a little needle in, and they're going to put your dye in, and it'll be okay. And he's like, I think it was so much he couldn't process it. And that's okay, because I didn't want him to have anxiety. I didn't want him to be upset. I usually do that with my kids. I don't let them sit there and some things I let them figure out and we talk about and they know it's coming, and some things I don't. I mean, I just pick and choose. So, we get there and, have to wait a little bit, and then we go back and she's like, do you want to go in with him? And I'm like in the room? And she goes, yeah. And I'm thinking, yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can. And she goes, okay. So then since I was going in the room, like they asked him all these questions, she's like, do you have this, that, the other? Everything was no. Then she said something about a wig. And I'm like, well, I do have fake hair. And she's like, well, let me see it. And she goes, oh, you got to take it off. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. So I did. And she took my watch and whatever. And so I get to go in with him. Well, she gives me these ear plugs. And she asked him, what kind of music you like? And he said, he goes, what mom did you say to, what mom? Which one did you tell me to tell him? And I said, country. So, because I thought Christian and Christmas probably is not an option. So I said, just do country. And so she goes, well, here's some earplugs. And I'm thinking to myself, I like country music. I mean, I won't need these, but okay, thanks. I've never been in an MRI. And so I go in there and they put him in and they said, you have to sit still. And if there's any problems, mom, just, squeeze this thing. And I'm like, okay. So we're in there and it's like, which I'm like, okay, no big deal. That's probably why they gave me the earphones or headphones or earplugs. And then it's like, I mean, it's all these different types of sounds that are so annoying and loud, like really loud. And I couldn't hear the music, but whatever. So I'm sitting in there, and she does a scan and then it gets quiet for a second. And then she does another scan, loud. And she does another one. And then she says, I'm going to come out and put the contrast in. And I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there with him and he's like, he can't move at this point, but I'm just like holding his hand or whatever, rubbing his arm. And he was upset because I want to say tourniquet, but I don't know what it's called. The thing that goes around your arm to stop the blood. And then he had to squeeze his hand. And he's like, Mom, I think I'm going to, I think my arm's going to fall off and it really hurts. And I said, I know, honey. Yes, it's a big hug on your arm. And she poked him. And I mean, seriously, I thought a little tear was going to come out. I mean, his eyes were getting watery. And I'm like, it's okay, buddy. It's no big deal. It's almost done. And she put the dye in and okay. So then she said, hey, just letting you know, it's going to be really loud. And I thought, how much louder? I mean, I feel like my eardrums are going to bleed, but I'm like, oh, okay. I thought, I'll be in there with my kid. That's fine. And, she was not lying. No exaggeration there. I thought the other times were loud, but, it was loud. So that's fine. She's like 9 minutes. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like an eternity, but it was okay. So we get done. He's feeling good. He doesn't usually eat breakfast, but he had eaten, I made waffle sticks. And so he ate 5 of those before we even left. Then he had taken a protein shake, one of those 30 grams of protein shake. He drank that on when he was leaving. When we were leaving, and we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts because we had to get some teachers some coffees and drinks and whatever. And he got a breakfast turkey sandwich, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, that's a lot of food, but okay. He doesn't usually eat, so whatever. And then I did get some chocolate munchkins, and he had 2 of those when we had stopped at a stop sign. He goes, can I spit this out? And I'm like, yeah. And I thought, oh, is it crunchy? What's going on? And he's like, no, it's just one too many donuts. I'm like, okay. So he spit it out, and then we went into school, and he's like, come on, Mom, because I was talking to Amy, and come on, Mom, we got to get signed in. I got to get in up to school. Okay, all right. So I sign him in, and I said, when does he have gym? And she goes, not for like a half hour. I said, okay. So because I didn't really want him running around at that point, I wanted to watch him for a half hour, and they had said kind of just don't let him do too much, for like an hour or so. And about the time we got back, it was about an hour. So, he does his thing. He leaves. I'm bye, buddy, whatever. He's like, I don't need a lunch. I'm not hungry. I'm not going to eat. I just pretty much ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner right now at breakfast time. So I'm good. Okay. So he, goes to class and then he goes to gym and he did not feel good. He goes, I don't feel good. And the, gym teacher let him sit out. And then, then I think they sent him down to the nurse. And I guess the nurse sent him back. I'm not sure exactly because at that point I didn't know. And then the nurse, she's new, she called up to Mrs. Duncan's room and said, "Is Mrs. Bonner there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is." And she's like, "Hey, I have your son." I said, "I'll be there." And I hung up because I thought, for my kids ever to go to the nurse, there's a problem. So, and I didn't even care to have her explain what it was. I'm going to come see my kid. So the one teacher said, "Oh my gosh, you're on a mission." I said, "Yeah, I got to get downstairs quickly. My kid's down there in the nurse's station." So I get down there and, he's kind of looking white and pale and talking really slowly and not really making too much sense. And I'm like, "Okay, buddy, are you all right?" And he goes, "I don't feel good." And he was just really lethargic acting. And I know, like, holding his stereotypies in for that amount of time, because he has to be so conscious about it, that is exhausting for anyone with stereotypies to hold any of their tics or whatever in, because they don't know they're doing it. So now they have to totally think about every single movement they are constantly making. It's very just very exhausting for them. So I said to him, "I'm going to sign you out." And Kristen took him up for me because I was signing him out and I didn't want him walking alone. And he went upstairs and he's like, "I feel like I'm going to get sick and I just don't feel good and whatever." So I called the pediatrician and they're like, "Yep, that's normal. If it's still lasting tomorrow, then that's not normal. He's supposed to drink a lot." And I'm like, "Oh, they didn't tell me that." Okay. And I said, "I gave him water, whatever." And so he stayed in my room because there's nobody home. I'm not going to take him home and then not be able to watch him. I'd worry the whole time. So he stayed in my room and he was fine. But he's like, "I don't want to give anybody this illness, Mom." And I'm like, "Buddy, it's from the contrast. You're not sick." So anyways, so we left school afterwards and he gets all his appliances back in and his, mouth stuff and he's good to go. And so I do appreciate you guys praying for us, praying for him. We'll get the results next week. I'm hoping that arachnocyst in the back of his head has not grown. I don't know what happens if it has. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and worry about it. I'm just hoping it hasn't. And that he's okay. He also has, I don't know, it's called pneumosis or something on his neck. And they told me when he was 14 that, because I said, "Can't we just get it lasered off?" Because I didn't like it. It looked like dirt. And I'm sitting there scrubbing my poor baby at 9 months, his neck, because I can't get this dirt off. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I'm pretty clean and I don't know what's going on with his neck." And it would bleed. And I'm like, "That doesn't look right." So then I took him to Cleveland Clinic too for the, what's it called? Dermatologist. And she's like, it's called pneumosis or something like that. Those of you in medical, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I think it's like neonovosis or something like that. Anyways, they told me, "No, we won't do that. We will not take it off now. We'll wait until he's 14 because it will flatten out. And then, we won't need to, if it flattens out, we don't need to mess with it or whatever." And I said, "What if it doesn't flatten out?" And they're like, "Well, by 14, if it doesn't flatten out, we'll have to remove it because it turns into skin cancer." And I'm like, "Okay, how does that thing on his neck know how old it is or whatever?" So anyways, but I take him back every year and he gets it checked and we're able to take him local because they just measure it and send it to Cleveland Clinic for us. And this past year, the past couple months, it's been growing like crazy, like not really spreading, but growing out. So definitely I've got to get him into Cleveland Clinic because my dermatologist here doesn't do the surgery for that. So I just want it off. I don't want to have to worry about it. I want him to be fine. And so we'll be looking into that also. Hopefully I can get him in during spring break or summer and get that off for him. But that kid, I don't know. They told me he's 1 in a million. He has a Mongolian spot, which we didn't know. He had blue skin on his back and arm. And I had the, I guess dermatologist, the one, take a sample or take a biopsy of it to see what it is, because they didn't really know what it was because it wasn't in the right spot, if it was a Mongolian spot. And they did come back that he had, Mongolian spots around his back and his arm and whatever. So they're like, yeah, that's 1 in a million children who have it and have it in the wrong spot. And I'm like, you don't know this child. I mean, he's 1 in a million for sure. But anyway, so I appreciate all y'all, all your thoughts and texts and messages and all your reaching out to us, because it was a day today, and it's been a week for him, just getting his stuff off and then doing this and then getting it back on. And we just really appreciate your time. We appreciate your thoughts and prayers, and we do appreciate everything that you are to us. So thank you. And that is my MRI experience. I've never had one. Do not want to do it. They asked me if he was claustrophobic, and I'm like, I hope not. I am deathly claustrophobic, but the hole looks big enough. I think it would be okay. And I think you would have to close your eyes just so you weren't looking and seeing, and I don't know. I think you would have to try to fall asleep if you could, or be out. So he said he would have rather been out and not had to experience trying to stay still, which I did feel bad about that. But I said, buddy, we were just trying to see if you could, do this, and you did such a fantastic job. So anyways, all right, take care, and I will talk to you, I'm sure, soon.